In this video, I'm going to talk you through some of the techniques I use to help me write. Now, unabashedly, I am a hybrid of a planner and a pantser, which means I like to discover things as I write, but also I like to plan, like a lot, or at least have notes that I can refer to. So in chapter 49,531, and I think to myself, oh, what did I say that guy's surname was back in chapter 4? I can look it up. So in no particular order of awesomeness, I'm going to talk you through some of the techniques I use for planning and keeping my notes organised. I'm a firm believer in creating for yourself a story bible as a guide to what you've written and what you're going to write. Now, if you approach your writing as a planner, you'll do a lot of work with your story bible before you start writing. If, on the other hand, you're more of a discovery writer, a pantser, you're going to be adding to the story bible as you go. Anything that's significant. So say in chapter 9, you introduce someone called Margaret. You better make a note of what her name is. If you said that she's unmarried, make a note of that. If she's the sister of the antagonist, make a note of that. Just the stuff you're going to need to look back up later. You don't have to go scouring through what you've written already, trying to find that one snippet of information that you know's in there somewhere. Like, hang on, where did I say it? Did I say it in chapter 4? Did I say it in chapter 7? Oh, crikey, piles and piles of pages to go through. Much better to keep your most important notes in one place. One of the best tools I've found for this is a resource I created for the writing charity that I chair, Thanet Creative, link in the description below. And this is what we call the character folio. It's a single-sided A4 designed to easily and quickly allow you to work out the most important information about a character. What they're called, how old they are, what relationships they have, what do they like, what do they hate, what are their quirks, what are their flaws, what are their vices, what do they want, and then where are they at when you start the story, and what's their journey through the story, and what's their destination. As a discovery writer, you're not going to fill that information out yet. You know where they start because you've just introduced them, and you know a little bit about them. Maybe you know what they like, what they dislike, or whatever, and you're going to maybe add to that as you go. As a planner, you're going to know all of this in advance, so you can fill it out now, work it all out. In an article I wrote recently, I talked about using LibreOffice, OpenOffice, as a free writing tool. In that, I talked about creating a master story bible and then arranging your notes in folders, but then using hyperlinks, which is something you can add very easily, to the various documents, and creating yourself a little footer that links you back to your master story bible, so that effectively you have your own personal wiki of information. If your world is one full of magic and you've done a lot of world building, you're going to have spells and artifacts and magic system notes and pictures. And if you're maybe the kind of writer that likes to use a mood board, something we use a lot on the Muse of Last Resort website, we create a lot of mood boards to try and help you get inspired to tell stories, then you might want to gather the most important pictures of that in a document, save it separately, hyperlink to it so that you can open it up at a moment's notice, and all you need to do is find the story bible, and everything else is one click away. You can have a lot of complicated interrelated information, and that information can be easily organised with links. The other technique I'm a big fan of is writing chapters as separate files and then adding a section to your master document which embeds that chapter in the master document. So you have a small file, maybe 3 to 10 pages, depending on what size your chapters are. They don't have to be in the final format that you're going to send them to a publisher with. They can be in whatever format you find works best for you when you're writing. And you do a few simple things. You tell the text, it's text body. You tell the heading, it's a heading. Then, when you embed into your master document, you can define a style sheet that'll format it however it needs to be formatted. So your writing formatting and your sending off formatting can be completely separate, and at the same time, you are only managing one chapter, which is just like handling a short story. In fact, the way I approach novels is to treat them like a series of interconnected short stories, which is essentially what chapters are really. I mean, let's be honest. You can get a copy of the character folio from the Thanet Creative Skills Centre. There'll be a link in the description below, and you can get that both as a PDF to print out and write on, as an OpenOffice document, and as an OpenOffice template. The template's called Character Folio 3 Lite because it doesn't include an entire page of notes. Let's talk about some of the details that you might like to capture about your character. So the first and foremost is their name. This is your primary handle on the character. In my opinion, they're not alive until they're named. And I try to use either the name, their nickname or aliases soon, and at least 3 times when they're first introduced. And these you would write on the character folio in the section name. Their gender, if it's important, if it matters, if they're gender fluid, whatever you're doing gender-wise, write that down. Are they a boy? Are they a girl? Are they a lord? Are they a reverend? Anything gender-specific goes in the gender section. If you want to be gender-neutral, leave it blank. It's your story. You tell it how you like. One of the things that you might not have thought of is the section on story role. The 2 obvious ones are protagonist, the hero, and the antagonist, the villain. But you might have a wise guide, a Yoda, or a mentor of some kind. A gatekeeper, your end-of-level boss type. Sidekick, love interest. Whatever role you feel your character is going to fill in your story, make a note of it. And the reason for making a note of it is that can be a quick handle for you to get a grasp of how much time the character needs, how you're going to write them. If they're the protagonist, you're going to have them front and centre. If they're the mentor, maybe there'll be a lot of them in the beginning and then they'll fade into the background. If they're the love interest, to build up the romantic tension. The story roles I've listed are mostly very troporific, but tropes can be a good handle, a good way just to get a quick insight into what the character's doing. You don't need to ever show this to anyone, so you can be as tropey and cliched as you like. Now, a character doesn't exist in a vacuum, which is why we've included a section for their relationships. For example, mum, dad, best friend, sister, brother, whatever is important to your story and your character's place in the world in terms of other people they're connected to, jot that down. I like to have an idea of how old my character is, and I'm never very specific and I rarely ever mention it, but I'll say this character's in his 30s, this one is in his 20s, this one's 7 years old, this one's 192, whatever. You might want to give them a date of birth, so you can track star signs and whatever. It's your story, you write it however you like. But characters have ages, and characters of different ages behave differently. So that can be an important reference point, a touchstone for how you're going to write your character. And then we go likes, loves, hates, quirks, flaws, vices and virtues, which I think are fairly self-explanatory, but I'll just zip through them quickly. Likes are things your character enjoys. They're different from loves, which is far more intense, like favourite fruit, walks in the park, taking showers, this sort of thing. Music, foods, type of wine, brand of deodorant, whatever details are relevant to understanding your character that you might need to reference. Loves. What is your character passionate about? What drives them? Is it football, bodybuilding, trading? There's a lot of romance. You might want to include character names here. This will help you answer the question of what they want, which is the true driving force in your story. Hates are the opposites of loves. They're what your character is strongly opposed to. In a revenge story, this might be the other guy, or it might be a food they really can't stand, a style of music they get irritable about. It depends on your character. It's your story, tell it how you want. Quirks. Everyone has at least one thing that marks them out as being different. Pattern of speech. Maybe they talk in cliches. Maybe they call all women babe. They have an odd habit. They smoke homegrown tobacco. They have a strange hobby. They breed roses. They collect cat statues. Whatever. While it's not necessary to give your character a defining quirk, it can help to round them out. What are their unique interests? What makes them different from anyone else? And while you may or may not ever mention it in the story, you as the writer should probably know these things. Flaws, pretty self-explanatory. No one likes a Mary Sue. Even the hero shouldn't be perfect. And the villain shouldn't be a card-carrying evildoer because he'd like to do evil. Flaws are those weaknesses of character. So, do they smoke, swear, drink, forget things? Are they unintentionally rude, slightly racist, or outright ignorant? Give a character something to overcome or wallow in, and they gain depth and are more interesting to write, and a lot more interesting to read. Vices are like flaws, but worse. They're a bad habit. So smoking, drinking, womanizing, nose-picking. I think 7 deadly sins if you're stuck. The character might not ever give up their particular vice. They might even find it handy just once, and perhaps, when they get into trouble, flies into a rage and starts fights their way out of the problem. I don't know. But vices are sort of defining flaws in character. There is a lot of overlap between flaws and vices, and you just use it how you want. And then virtues. And this is important especially for your antagonist. No matter how evil a character is, they will have something good about them, and a good character will have something excellent about them. Are they animal lovers? Are they very honest? Do they always pay their bills on time? For example, your card-carrying villain, does he love puppies? Make sure you give both your good guys and your bad guys some virtues. This will make them more well-rounded, it will make them more interesting to write, and it will make them more interesting to read. And that combination of virtues, vices, flaws and quirks will make a very interesting character. And then towards the bottom of the page we've got backstory. What were they doing before they got into the story? A character doesn't just pop into existence. They had a life before your story. And if they survive your story, they'll have a life after it. And it's not necessary to tell your readers what they were doing, but you as the writer need to know what your character was doing before they got on stage. Now the journey during the story is self-explanatory. How are they going to change? How are they going to grow? Very important for your protagonist, but also possibly important for your antagonist and any serious supporting characters. And the destination at the end of the story, where are they going to end up? For a planner, you're going to work this out in advance. For a pantser or a discovery writer, you're going to discover this by the time you've finished writing. As you discover these things, write them down, or as you plan them, write them down. That's the template for character and how I use it. I will create at least 3 or 4 of these. One for the main character, your protagonist, one for your villain, your antagonist, and some for any important supporting character who are also going to undergo some degree of growth and change as characters. In stark contrast to the paper-based, file-based way of planning, I also have another technique I sometimes use. I particularly use this for planning a series of blog posts or ebooks, and that is my post-it notes on the wall technique, which I was introduced to earlier this year by a friend. The way I approach this is I try and plan out 10 chapter headings or ebook titles that I'm going to write about along a theme, and I put a post-it note up with each of those. And maybe if I'm feeling I've got time that day, I will then go on and I will start to write on a different colour post-it note some theme ideas, some talking points, a few words that summarise what sort of things I'm going to talk about. And maybe with another colour post-it note, I'm going to put questions that a reader wanting to know about this might ask, and then I'm going to answer them. And I go back and I do this over several days, maybe a week, expanding and getting to know my topics. And sometimes I'll find that 2 topics that I thought were separate are really part and parcel of the same, and I'll merge them, I'll move them around. This opens up a slot for a new topic or chapter. And once I feel I've fleshed out what I'm going to say, what I'm going to write about, I then go to stage 2. Now stage 2 is fast drafting. Rather than write, what I do is I get my phone, I open up Google Docs, and I dictate my thoughts. So I'll go through the talking points, I'll make sure I've said them all, I'll say the questions, and then I'll answer the questions. And when I've finished, I'll have an awful document that Google Docs has mangled bits of, and I'll pull that down onto my desktop. I'll clean up Google Docs mishearing me, and I'll make sure the full stops are in, and I'll format it properly, and I'll just give it a general going over, edit for pace and consistency. And then I'll come back the next day and I'll go over it again. At that point, I'm going to send it out to beta readers. Right now I have 2 almost ready for publication in the Amazon Kindle store out of 10. They were written exclusively using the post-it notes on the wall technique. This I find works better especially for non-fiction, because whereas for fiction you need a story bible and you need to know the narrative, for non-fiction you've got questions you need to answer, and then you need to put them in some sort of sensible order. And if you can put them in sensible order before you start talking, before you start the process of writing the article or the ebook, you know that you will have covered all the important points by the time you get to the end, and they'll be roughly in the right order, which is very good because sometimes my dyspraxia comes through and I have all sorts of sequencing issues. I get things in the wrong order. This technique allows me to just plan without worrying about sequence, and then think only about sequence once I've done planning, but before I start writing. And by writing I mean dictating to my phone. Round one is my phone doing the typing, which as a dyslexic is quite a good head start because my spelling is not great. Spend long enough on the blogs that I write and you will find spelling mistakes. Despite my spell checker, despite Grammarly, despite memorising all the things that I get wrong on a regular basis, I still get things wrong. And that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Stay nerdy.